"This tray suits you," the flight attendant said with a smirk, handing the simple sandwich to the woman in seat 3C while serving gourmet meals to the men. Little did she know this passenger was a powerful CEO. Hours later, after landing, that same CEO made one phone call. "Fire them all immediately." Now the entire crew understood what happens when you underestimate a woman in a gray suit. Camille Forrester adjusted her gray blazer as her town car approached the terminal at O'Hare International Airport. At 45, she had mastered the art of blending in, despite her position as CEO of Forrester Technologies, one of the fastest-growing companies in America. Today's flight to New York would precede the biggest announcement of her career. The acquisition of their main competitor, a $2.8 billion deal, would change the industry landscape. "Your documents, Miss Forrester," her assistant said, handing her a slim portfolio. "And, remember, the board meets you at JFK at 3 p.m. Camille nodded, slipping the portfolio into her leather bag. "Thank you, David. I'll see you tomorrow." As the driver unloaded her carry-on, Camille checked her phone one last time. A message from Howard Richardson, CEO of Meridian Airlines, confirmed their dinner next week. His company had been providing exclusive transportation for her executives for years, making her account worth millions annually. The relationship was valuable to both parties, though they'd never actually met in person. Inside the terminal, Camille bypassed the main security line, heading toward the premium access gate. The attendant barely glanced at her boarding pass and ID before waving her through. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am," he said mechanically, already looking past her to the next passenger. Camille was accustomed to this polite indifference. In her early career, it had bothered her how executives in suits commanded immediate respect while she had to prove herself repeatedly. These days, she almost appreciated the anonymity. It let her observe how people truly behaved when they didn't think anyone important was watching. The premium lounge was crowded with the usual mix of business travelers. Men in tailored suits dominated the space, their confident voices carrying across the room as they discussed market trends and golf handicaps. A few women in corporate attire sat among them, some affecting the same boisterous confidence, others quietly working on laptops. Camille chose a quiet corner, ordering a sparkling water before reviewing her notes. The acquisition documents needed one final review before tomorrow's announcement. She was so absorbed in her work that she almost missed the boarding announcement. As she approached the gate, Camille noticed the crew greeting passengers. The lead flight attendant, a blonde woman with a perfect smile, was chatting animatedly with an older executive in a navy suit. "Mr. Peterson, so wonderful to see you again. We've reserved your favorite scotch," the attendant gushed. When it was Camille's turn, the same attendant, Lindsay according to her name tag, gave her a cursory nod. "Boarding pass?" Lindsay asked, her warm smile replaced with mechanical efficiency. Camille presented her first-class ticket. Lindsay scanned it, then returned it without meeting Camille's eyes. "Seat 3C, she said, already looking past Camille to the next passenger. "Down the aisle to your right." Aboard the aircraft, Camille stored her carry-on and settled into her window seat. First class was filling up with the usual demographic, mostly men in their 50s and 60s, with a few younger executives peppered in. She watched as each male passenger received personalized greetings from the cabin crew. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. Welcome back. Can I start you with champagne, Mr. Pierce? We haven't seen you in a few weeks. How was London?" Camille observed it all with quiet interest. No one had offered her a pre-flight beverage, despite the fact that her Meridian Airlines profile listed her as a Platinum Elite member who had flown over 100,000 miles in the past year alone. As the final passengers boarded, a tall man in a tailored gray suit approached her row. "3D," he said with a practiced smile, gesturing to the aisle seat beside her. Looks like we're neighbors today. Jonathan Pierce, according to the monogrammed cufflinks peeking from under his sleeve, settled in beside her, immediately signaling to a passing flight attendant. Lindsay, good to see you again, he called, as if they were old friends. Camille returned to her documents, mentally preparing for what experience told her would be an enlightening flight, though not in the way the crew might expect. The safety demonstration concluded as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. Camille had already stowed her documents, now watching the subtle dynamics of the cabin with practiced attention. Lindsay and another flight attendant moved through first class offering hot towels to the passengers. Here you are, Mr. Pierce, Lindsay said, presenting the steaming towel with a flourish. Careful, it's hot. When she reached Camille, she simply placed the towel on her tray table without a word, already turning toward the next row. Camille wiped her hands slowly, observing as Lindsay chatted comfortably with the businessman across the aisle. It wasn't that Camille expected special treatment, it was the stark difference in basic courtesy that caught her attention. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the cabin service began. Lindsay approached the first row with a tablet in hand. Good morning, gentlemen. For today's lunch, we have a seared salmon with quinoa, a premium Angus beef burger, or a gourmet chicken wrap. And what can I get you to drink? Camille listened as the flight attendant worked her way through the cabin, maintaining her warm, attentive approach with each male passenger. The man beside her, Jonathan, ordered the beef burger with a scotch on the rocks, receiving an excellent choice, Mr. Pierce, in response. When Lindsay finally reached Camille, her demeanor shifted subtly. No smile, no eye contact, just efficiency. What would you like? She asked, her tone flat. Could you tell me about the lunch options, please? Camille asked politely. Lindsay's lips tightened slightly. We have a sandwich or a wrap left. Camille raised an eyebrow. I thought there was salmon and beef as well. Those are limited, Lindsay replied curtly. We've run out. From the corner of her eye, Camille noticed the flight attendant serving the salmon dish to a male passenger who had boarded after her. She made a mental note but didn't comment. The wrap, then, and sparkling water, please. We'll serve shortly, Lindsay said, moving away without acknowledgement. Jonathan leaned over slightly. First time in first class? He asked, his tone conversational but slightly condescending. Not exactly, Camille replied with a small smile. I fly frequently. Well, tip for next time, book the kosher meal in advance. It's always better than the standard options and they can't run out because it's reserved. Camille nodded politely. Thank you for the advice. As drinks were served, Camille noted that Jonathan received his scotch in a crystal glass with the premium brand visible on the bottle, while her sparkling water came in a plastic cup without a lemon slice, unlike the other beverages she observed being served. The man to her right, an older executive who had boarded last, received not only his requested bourbon, but also warm nuts and a personal check-in from the purser. When the meals arrived, the discrepancy became even more apparent. Jonathan's tray featured the beef burger on proper china, garnished with microgreens and accompanied by truffle fries. A linen napkin and metal cutlery completed the presentation. Lindsay placed Camille's tray before her with barely a glance. Instead of the wrap she had ordered, there was a plain turkey sandwich on a paper plate with a packet of chips. Plastic cutlery was wrapped in a thin napkin. This isn't what I ordered, Camille noted calmly. Lindsay gave her a brief, tight smile. We ran out of wraps too. This tray suits you just fine. She moved on before Camille could respond. From the seat behind her, Camille overheard a male passenger being offered both the wrap and salmon options. the very items supposedly out of stock. Camille took out her phone, opened her notes app, and began typing discreetly. This wasn't the first time she'd experienced such treatment while traveling, but it was certainly the most blatant. And on this particular day, with this particular airline, the timing couldn't have been more significant. Camille unwrapped the sandwich slowly, maintaining her composed demeanor despite the obvious slight. The bread was slightly stale, the fillings sparse, nothing like the gourmet meals being served around her. As she took a small bite, she observed Lindsay attending to Jonathan with extra attention. "How's the burger, Mr. Pierce? Can I get you another scotch?" "Excellent as always, Lindsay," he replied. "And yes, another would be perfect." Lindsay beamed at him before turning away, never acknowledging Camille beside him. It was as if there were an invisible barrier between seats 3C and 3D. Camille sipped her water, continuing her careful documentation on her phone. 20 minutes into the meal service, she noticed the flight attendants gathered near the galley, Lindsay's voice carrying just enough for her to catch fragments. "Always complaining, shouldn't be up here anyway." A subtle glance showed Lindsay gesturing in her direction while whispering to another crew member. The other attendant peeked over, then quickly looked away when she noticed Camille watching. Jonathan had struck up a conversation with the businessman across the aisle, their voices carrying confidently as they discussed their latest golf outings and business acquisitions. Camille remained quiet, listening as they exchanged cards and made plans to meet at a country club the following week. "Excuse me," Camille finally said, pressing her call button. The light remained illuminated for nearly 5 minutes before Lindsay approached, her expression making clear the interruption was unwelcome. "Yes?" Her tone was clipped, professional but cold. "I didn't receive any dessert," Camille noted calmly, having observed chocolate mousse being served to other passengers in first class. Lindsay's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We've run out. Anything else?" Before Camille could respond, Lindsay was already turning away. As she did, her elbow deliberately knocked against Camille's water cup, spilling it across the tray. "Oh!" Lindsay's surprise seemed performative. "I'm so sorry about that." She grabbed a thin napkin and dropped it on the puddle, making minimal effort to clean up the spill that was now dripping onto Camille's gray slacks. "Let me know if you need anything else," Lindsay added before walking away, leaving Camille to deal with the mess. Jonathan glanced over, offering a perfunctory, "Tough luck," before returning to his conversation across the aisle. Camille dabbed at her damp pants, adding another note to her phone. She had experienced her share of subtle discrimination throughout her career, but rarely so blatantly. As a woman who had risen from entry-level programmer to CEO, she'd developed a thick skin and a strategic mind. When the head purser passed by a few minutes later, Camille stopped him with a polite gesture. "Excuse me, could I please have your name?" The man looked surprised but answered professionally. "Kevin Matthews, ma'am. Is there a problem I can help with?" "Not at the moment, Mr. Matthews. I'd just like to know for my records." His expression shifted to confusion, but he nodded and continued down the aisle. From her seat, Camille could see Lindsay serving freshly brewed coffee to the businessmen, offering them chocolate biscotti that had mysteriously appeared despite the supposed dessert shortage. When Jonathan received his coffee in a porcelain cup with the biscotti on a small plate, Lindsay deliberately avoided looking in Camille's direction. The message was clear. Some passengers deserve premium service, and in Lindsay's estimation, Camille was not among them. Camille closed her notes app and opened her email instead. She composed a message addressed to her assistant, David. Please gather the contact information for Howard Richardson's office. I'll need to speak with him directly after landing. Priority level. Immediate." With that sent, she settled back in her seat, outwardly calm, while her mind worked through the precise steps she would take once they reached New York. The remainder of the flight continued in much the same pattern. When the beverage service came around again, Lindsay managed to skip Camille's row entirely, though she cheerfully offered Jonathan another scotch. When Camille used her call button again, a different flight attendant responded, though her demeanor suggested Lindsay had already spoken to her about the difficult passenger in 3C. Camille requested a coffee, receiving it after a considerable delay in a paper cup, lukewarm and black, without the milk she had requested. Rather than calling attention to the error, she simply added it to her growing documentation. An hour before landing, the purser made his way through the cabin, distributing hot towels to refresh the passengers. When he reached Camille, he hesitated, glancing toward the galley where Lindsay was watching. "Would you care for a hot towel, ma'am?" he asked, his tone neutral but his expression uncertain. "Yes, thank you," Camille replied with a small smile. After he moved on, she noticed Lindsay approach him in the galley, whispering something that made him look back at Camille with renewed weariness. Jonathan had fallen asleep beside her, his half-finished scotch still clutched loosely in his hand. Across the aisle, two other businessmen were discussing a recent merger, their voices carrying easily. "Did you hear about Forrester Technologies?" one asked. "Word is they're announcing a major acquisition tomorrow, Camille Forrester's company. She's been making waves lately." Not what anyone expected from her when she took over. "She's ruthless from what I hear. Brilliant, but doesn't suffer fools." Camille kept her expression neutral, though a hint of a smile played at the corner of her mouth. Her reputation preceded her in business circles, though few would recognize her face. She had deliberately maintained a low profile throughout her career, rarely appearing in press photos and declining most speaking engagements. This anonymity had served her well, allowing her to observe people's true behavior rather than the deferential facade often presented to known executives. As the aircraft began its descent into JFK, the cabin crew prepared for landing. Camille closed her laptop and stowed her belongings, catching Lindsay's eye briefly as the flight attendant passed by. Lindsay quickly looked away, her discomfort evident now that she had heard the businessmen's conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our descent into New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, please ensure your seatbelts are fastened, your tray tables are stowed, and your seats are in the upright position." The captain's announcement continued as the plane dropped through the clouds, revealing the sprawling cityscape below. Camille gazed out the window, mentally reviewing the steps she would take once they landed. The acquisition announcement was scheduled for tomorrow morning, but she had another matter to attend to first. As the wheels touched down on the runway, a flight attendant thanked the passengers for flying Meridian Airlines. The usual scramble for overhead bins began as soon as the seatbelt sign dinged off, despite the crew's request for passengers to remain seated. Jonathan woke with a start, checking his watch before gathering his belongings. He nodded curtly to Camille as he stood, not bothering with a goodbye as he joined the line forming in the aisle. Lindsay moved through the cabin, thanking each male passenger personally for choosing Meridian and expressing hope to see them again soon. When she passed Camille's row, she offered only a perfunctory nod before moving on. Camille remained seated, allowing the initial rush to subside. She had no need to hurry. Her driver would be waiting regardless, and she had a phone call to make before leaving the airport. She watched as Lindsay laughed at something Jonathan said near the exit. The flight attendant's entire demeanor transformed into warm professionalism, a courtesy selectively applied. When the cabin had mostly emptied, Camille finally stood, collecting her bag with unhurried precision. The real business of the day was about to begin. The jet bridge hummed with activity as passengers streamed toward the terminal. Camille walked at an unhurried pace, observing Lindsay and the other crew members stationed at the aircraft door, offering warm goodbyes to select passengers. As Camille approached, Lindsay's smile dimmed, replaced by a neutral expression that barely acknowledged her presence. "Thank you for flying with us," Lindsay said mechanically, already looking past Camille to the passenger behind her. Camille paused briefly. "I'll be sure to document my experience thoroughly," she said, her tone pleasant, but her eyes sharp. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Lindsay's face before she masked it with professional indifference. "Have a nice day, ma'am." Inside the terminal, Camille bypassed the crowds heading toward baggage claim and made her way to the exclusive Meridian Platinum Lounge. The attendant at the entrance scanned her boarding pass, her eyes widening slightly as the system flagged Camille's status. "Miss Forrester," she said, her tone suddenly deferential. "We weren't notified you were traveling today. Please, come in. Would you like me to arrange a private room?" "That would be perfect, thank you," Camille replied, noting the immediate shift in treatment now that her elite status had been properly recognized. Inside the private room, Camille set her bag down and took out her phone. She dialed a number from memory, waiting only moments before it was answered. "David, I've landed. Has Mr. Richardson's office responded?" "Yes, Miss Forrester. He was quite surprised by your request for an immediate meeting. He's actually at JFK for a board presentation and can meet you in 30 minutes. "Perfect. Have him come to the Platinum Lounge, Private Room 3. And David." "Yes?" "Make sure he brings the crew manifest and passenger service records from Meridian Flight 1382 from Chicago today." "Already requested, Miss Forrester." Camille ended the call and settled into the plush chair, reviewing her detailed notes from the flight. Each instance of disparate treatment was documented with precision, times, statements, and specific actions. 20 minutes later, a light knock at the door preceded the lounge attendant. "Miss Forrester, Mr. Richardson has arrived." Howard Richardson entered the room with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding attention. In his mid-60s, with silver hair and an impeccable suit, he extended his hand with a practiced smile. "Miss Forrester, a pleasure to finally meet in person. I must say your request for an immediate meeting was quite unexpected." Camille shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for accommodating me, Mr. Richardson. Please have a seat." As Howard settled into the chair across from her, his expression was one of polite curiosity mingled with slight confusion. "I understand you were on our Chicago-New York flight today. I hope everything was satisfactory." "Far from it," Camille replied calmly, sliding her phone across the table. "I've documented a pattern of discriminatory behavior from one of your flight attendants, supported by the purser. I'd like you to review it." Howard's brow furrowed as he picked up the phone, scrolling through her detailed notes. His expression shifted from confusion to concern, then to alarm. "This is concerning," he said finally, looking up. "I assure you, Miss Forrester, this is not representative of Meridian service standards." "I would hope not," Camille replied, "especially considering that Forrester Technologies has been your company's second-largest corporate client for the past 3 years. Our contract, worth approximately $22 million annually, is up for renewal next month." Howard's face paled visibly. "I had no idea." "Few people connect my name with my face," Camille said. "I prefer it that way. It allows me to see how your staff truly treats passengers when they believe no one important is watching. She held his gaze steadily. Now, Mr. Richardson, I'd like to discuss how you plan to address this situation, because I can assure you it will be addressed one way or another. The private lounge had grown uncomfortably silent as Howard Richardson placed Camille's phone back on the table, his fingers slightly unsteady. The reality of the situation had clearly registered. One of his most valuable corporate clients had been deliberately mistreated by his staff, and the consequences could be severe. "Ms. Forrester," he began, his tone now deeply apologetic, "I want to personally express my profound regret for your experience today. This is absolutely unacceptable." "I agree," Camille said simply. "What I'm interested in is action, not apologies." Howard nodded, straightening his posture. "Of course. I've already sent a message to have the crew held at the airport. I'll be conducting an immediate investigation." "That's a start," Camille replied. She opened her laptop and turned it toward him. "You should also know that Forrester Technologies isn't the only significant corporate account affected by this behavior. My assistant has compiled data suggesting a pattern of similar complaints from female executives at other companies who hold contracts with Meridian." Howard's eyes widened as he scanned the documentation. "I had no idea this was systemic." "Most discrimination is," Camille observed, "until someone decides to address it." A knock at the door interrupted them as Howard's assistant entered with a folder. "The crew manifest and service records you requested, sir." Howard thanked him, then spread the documents on the table. "Lindsay Thompson has been with us for 8 years. There have been notes in her file, but nothing that triggered formal action, because the complaints were likely dismissed as isolated incidents," Camille said. "That ends today." 40 minutes later, Lindsay Thompson and purser Kevin Matthews stood in the administration office at JFK, facing Howard Richardson and Camille Forrester. Lindsay's confident demeanor had evaporated, replaced by visible shock, when she recognized her former passenger now sitting beside the CEO. "Miss Thompson," Howard began gravely, "I've reviewed significant evidence of discriminatory behavior on today's flight, corroborated by multiple passenger accounts and your own service record." Lindsay's face flushed. "Sir, I can explain." "There's no explanation that would justify what I witnessed," Camille interjected calmly, "or what appears to be a pattern of similar behavior over time." Howard nodded. "Effective immediately, both of you are suspended pending investigation. Given the evidence already available, I expect this will result in termination." Kevin began to protest, but Howard raised his hand. "The decision is final. Meridian Airlines cannot and will not tolerate discrimination of any kind." As Lindsay and Kevin were escorted out, Howard turned to Camille. "I'll be implementing a comprehensive review of our training protocols and service standards." Camille nodded. "I'll be watching the results closely, Mr. Richardson. Respect shouldn't depend on whether you recognize the person you're serving. In business and in life, true character shows in how we treat others when we think no one important is watching." If Camille's story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from today? Remember, everyone deserves respect, regardless of appearance or gender. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one being underestimated.